I'm Erica Lukes, host of UFO Classified. For me, life isn't simply black and white. Life is full of many unknowns. It is my goal to travel the world and to work with the world's leading experts in the hopes of making groundbreaking discoveries. Join me on UFO Classified Friday nights at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, only on KCOR.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Well, happy Fantopia Friday, my friends. I'm Erica Lukes. Happy to be here, as you know, every Friday with my friends from all over the world. I love the fact that the show is growing in numbers, that there is a lot of great feedback, and now that I am going to be on two new TV shows, they'll have the capacity to reach a larger audience. And you know that my goal is to get good information out to the public, factual information, and to also try to weed through the lies and games that we are seeing, especially right now in the field of ufology, specifically here in America. I say this on every show now because this is really, really, really important. But I have done and am in the process of continuing my research on Skinwalker Ranch, specifically during the Bob Bigelow days, and have done some groundbreaking interviews with Chris Marks and Chris Bartell. I spoke with two other people today who have been investigating behind the scenes for quite some time into this usual cast of characters that keeps popping up. And some interesting things are coming to light. There is a big network of people who are looking into this, and we are coming up with lots of interesting things. We will all keep you posted, and I assure you when the time is right, this information will be made to the public. But at the end of the day, just know that you have been manipulated, and the people that have manipulated you are not doing this for the greater good of mankind. So I want to just throw that out there. But on a happy note, tonight I'm going to focus on something that is kind of getting back to why I originally started to be interested in this topic. There is a genuine phenomenon, and when you get away from all of that garbage, you see this beauty and this mystery, and you look back historically and you can see just all of these interesting tales that seem to be very consistent over time. My guest this evening is a breath of fresh air. I can't believe it has taken me so long to finally connect with him. I know he and Greg Bishop are friends, and as you know, Greg is a dear friend of mine. I saw him a couple weeks ago in LA. My guest this evening is Joshua Cutchin, who is an author, a musician. So, you know, I have a fondness for him already since he's one of my people. But he is pursuing his dream. He's a full-time author. And Josh, I just want to say, how cool are you that you're a musician, that you've been doing that your whole life?
Well, I mean, I play tuba, so I can't be that cool.
It's cool in a nerdy way.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I play tuba in bars and concert venues, so maybe that's a little bit cooler than playing Sousa marches.
I think that's awesome, though. I love it. And you've written a lot of different books and over 100 articles. I mean, you've really accomplished quite a bit. And from what Greg says, you just are you have so many wonderful ideas. So it'll be, like I said, it's a breath of fresh air to have you on tonight. Thank you for being here. I am very happy to obviously be here with Joshua Cutchin, and while we're kind of waiting to see if he can connect back on, I just want to tell you a little bit about the books that he has authored. One of them is A Trojan Feast, The Brimstone Deceit, Thieves in the Night, UFOs Reframing the Debate, which is a great book. Some of the people that contributed to different chapters in that book have all been on my show before. I really, really like that. He also authored Wood Knocks and has conducted a lot of different interviews. So I want to just a little teeny bit talk about Reframing the Debate. And if you don't know anything about it, Robbie Graham put the book together. And in the book, it's different researchers like Greg Bishop and Joshua they talk a little bit about the UFO enigma, and they look at it from a very rational perspective, critical but constructive, and it offers a whole range of views, but it also kind of calls on ufology to break away from some of the established ideas and approaches to things, which is awesome. And I also want to just mention that, Jack Brewer, who was on my show a month ago, is featured in this book. Lauren Cutts, who is a friend of mine, Smiles Lewis has been on the show. Red Pill Junkie contributed to the book, which I want to just say this until we get Joshua back on Skype. I'm telling you, the gods of Skype can be very cruel sometimes. But Red Pill Junkie wrote an article several years ago. And that article, do I hear somebody breathing on the other end?
Breathing heavily and excitedly because I'm like, no, what's going on? Yeah, we just had the internet put in the other day, and I'm still trying to get a feel for how reliable it is. I think it should be fine. We're in a populous area, so anyway, sorry about that. My apologies.
Oh, we're used to living on the edge here, and I'm telling you. And Tina Marie, my producer, she's gone through the ringer with me.
You were saying really nice things about me before I dropped off, so I hate that I missed all that.
Well, I'm very excited that you're here, and I think you have a very unique perspective on things, and I love that you look at kind of the more joyful, maybe, aspects of the subject, and you look at it historically. And so tell us how you first got started in the subject.
Well, unlike a lot of people who had some sort of watershed experience, I was either unfortunate or fortunate enough to not have one, depending on whom you ask. I was just really, I was a monster kid. I was into monsters and creature features and stuff like that. So I naturally gravitated towards those sort of things in my school library and my local library, and just, read, and was interested in it, and then sort of fell off a little bit. I primarily was interested in Bigfoot because I was originally quite skeptical of the whole UFO thing for various reasons. And then around 2012, I got a job where I had about an hour commute, each way. And I started, diving into the world of paranormal podcasts. And that really rekindled my interest. And I started hearing things that were alternatives to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, about the UFO phenomena and the contact experience, that made me reconsider the viability and the possibility of the reality of what's going on. And I just got really interested in it. And I sort of started to accrue little bits and pieces that I found interesting. And for some reason, and to this day, I can't tell you exactly why it jumped out at me. Being a 30-something, 6'4", red-blooded American man, why I found, the fairy folklore so interesting, but I did. And the one bit of folklore that I found really interesting, for whatever reason, don't know why I remembered this, was that if you were ever invited to fairyland in the Celtic myths and legends, and you were offered food by the good folk, and you ate food, you were actually doomed to stay with them forever. And it's interesting. I put that in my back pocket in case I'm ever abducted by a leprechaun or something, right? It might come in useful. But then in 2014, I got an Amazon gift card from my sister-in-law for my birthday, and I picked up J. Robert Alley's Raincoast Sasquatch, which is a great book on Bigfoot. It's more of a flesh and blood interpretation, but in it he addresses several different native bodies of belief, and one of them along the Alaskan coast, there's an indigenous people. It's either Tsimshian or Tlingit. I can't ever remember which, but one of these tribes feels that the Bequus, their Bigfoot analog, would offer people food to eat. And if you accepted the food, you would turn into a Bequus forever. And not only was this food meant to trap people, but it was often revealed after you ate it that it was actually bark and twigs and leaves and basically detritus, which again is very common, very, very thematic with what you would find in fairy folklore as well. Whenever fairies offered you food, you'd eat it and would be worms and grass and leaves, etc. So I said, that's really interesting. I'll, buy the Nick Redfern book when it comes out, because I'm sure he'll stumble upon this. So, sat back for a couple of months. Because, unless you have that sort of Paul on the road to Damascus moment, it's really easy to be hesitant to get into these subjects, especially if you're going to put your name on something associated with it. So I, a couple of months passed, and I thought, this is a really compelling connection here, and nothing happened, and nothing happened, and nothing happened. So I said, well, maybe it's, I'll take it upon me to write this book. And on a whim, I did. I was working at the University of Georgia for the School of Music's PR program. And during the summer months, it was pretty quiet around there. So I, researched and sort of started writing it during the summer months in my office. And in 2015, I released A Trojan Feast, and much to my surprise, I was getting lots of great feedback from people that I had admired, for quite some time, including people like Patrick Weege, the publisher at Anomalist Books, who's published all three of my current books, and people like Greg Bishop. Absolutely, humbling to have these people that I've been listening to and reading actually think that I did something kind of neat.
That's so cool.
So I did that, and it was after. You can't unring a bell. So after your name's associated with this, there's no going back. There's no walking that back. I'm convinced in hindsight that there were a couple of jobs that I applied for in a public relations capacity that I got to a certain round, and then they decided, oh, let's Google him and see what he says. And they found all this stuff about UFOs and fairies and Bigfoot, and they're like, oh, well, this guy's crazy. So I just in for a penny, in for a pound. Went ahead and just ended up really focusing more on my music, doing teaching, doing playing exclusively, and writing as well. Writing in the daytime, playing at night, basically. And that's how I ended up sort of stumbling onto the next book, which was The Brimstone Deceit, which is about the smells and paranormal encounters, natural outgrowth from tastes. There are a lot of common smells, not only that sulfur brimstone smell, but a lot of other common smells you find in spirit cases, in UFO cases, in Bigfoot cases. And then it's, my name is sullied now, so I'm just going to stick with this as long as I can.
Well, it's fun, and I like it. It's so nice to find people that actually have their head screwed on and are capable of looking at things, rationally, but then also have a keen mind and look at some of these deeper aspects of things. And I like that. I like finding people like you.
Well, my primary mode of putting together a book is citation, comparison, and then comment. I mean, I'm not really, some people have introduced me as fairy expert Joshua Cutchin. I've never said that. There are people across the pond who are much better versed in this than me. Probably, probably the best first 6'4" American male in this stuff. but the fairy lore I've found is, I wouldn't say explicative because it doesn't really explain anything, but it's very consistent with what we find in a lot of these different encounters, but especially the UFO contact experience. So what I try to do is I try to find these sources, and I'm sort of an endnote fetishist. I love to cite exactly where things are. I think my last book had like 100 pages of endnotes and
wow.
Bibliography. I mean, it's just because I want to be transparent about where this stuff comes from. So find something, compare it to something that we find in the modern UFO literature, and then comment on what that could possibly mean. That's sort of been my MO for the past 3 books.
Wow. And so I've got to ask you, because it is interesting with the smells and all of that aspect, and how they seem to be, there's some common smells that take place in all sorts of different types of sightings, and so can you go through a few of the common smells that you researched?
Well, it's kind of funny. When I came up with the name for the second book, The Brimstone Deceit, I mean, it sounds like a Joel Osteen conservative Christian book or something along those lines. But at the same time, there is this. It's not even though I am a Christian, it's not a book that views anything through a Christian prism. It really is just looking at the prevalence of brimstone or sulfur, and that's a smell that you'll find both explicitly and obliquely referenced in case after case after case between Bigfoot, UFOs and spirits. I mean, I say obliquely and directly. Sometimes people will say it smelled like sulfur. Sometimes they'll say it smelled like burning matches. Well, that's hydrogen disulfide. If memory serves, it's been a while since I looked at it. Yes, and also, hydrogen sulfide as well, which is sort of that rotten egg smell that we get. So you can sort of find descriptions of decomposition, which tie into that as well. I mean, anytime you have decomposition in the absence of oxygen from bacteria, you'll produce hydrogen sulfide. Anyway, so that's one of the smells that you find a lot. You find ozone in a lot of spirit and UFO encounters, in a lot of possession cases. After the possession occurs, they will actually discover, the smell of ozone in the room. Similarly, ozone is a very common scent in UFO encounters. Sometimes people will encounter two scents at once. Sometimes the trickiest thing about research like this is that people often can't put their finger on the smell that they're describing. There's actually a name for it in olfactory studies, which is the tip of the nose phenomena, where they're like, it smells like something, but I don't know exactly what. The compound that I mentioned earlier about the struck matches was sulfur dioxide. I want to make sure I get that right. Like I said, it's been a long time since I looked at that. And looking back, oh, that's right, that's what it's called. But also, certain sweet smells occur from time to time in different cases. There's an interesting connection across some different cases of this cinnamon smell that Whitley Strieber mentioned he smelled during some of his encounters as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And there's some interesting things once you start cracking open that, the smell apple, so to speak. Once you start cracking this egg, you start finding interesting things like hydrogen sulfide is a very common smell in alien abductions, and in significant doses it can lead to reproductive problems. And that obviously, for anyone familiar with the literature, that sort of speaks for itself. If you go on down the line, you can find analogs for a lot of these different smells between, like I said, all these sort of disparate phenomena. I will say, I can say with confidence that it's the only book that's ever been dedicated just to smells of the supernatural. So the book is dedicated to smells and spirit accounts, smells and UFO accounts, and smells and Bigfoot accounts. Which
that's
is
amazing.
Sort of frustrating to me when I hear people in the Bigfoot community be like, I wonder what Bigfoot smells mean. I'm like, I read a book on, but I'm sort of the black sheep in a lot of these communities because I tend to be more of looking at things more from a folkloric encounter than just, collecting and processing and regurgitating a lot of different cases, which is, it's fine. It has its place, but I'd like to see people kind of interested in doing a little bit more of a deeper dive and really saying, well, what does this mean? Just because people smell this, what does it mean?
Absolutely. And I for me, it's fascinating. I had an encounter a few months ago. We were pretty close to Skinwalker Ranch, and for, almost an hour, we smelled sulfur. It was like it was right on top of us. And the wind was perfectly still. There was nothing around. It was very, very odd. And so it's, I know that sulfur that smell is common. And I spoke with Barry Taff, who's been on my show before, and we speak quite frequently, and he's a parapsychologist, but he was mentioning that he had an experience the other day in his home where he was almost overwhelmed by that smell as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there are a lot of different little angles that you can take here and there. For example, a lot of people have thought that perhaps when we see UFOs and they're just orbs of light, they might be some sort of earthquake-like, some sort of tectonic seismic activity generated luminescence. And, a lot of fissures in the ground are associated with these underground gases as well. A lot of the smells that you see associated in UFO reports are often smells that do emanate from the ground. Not saying that I think that every UFO is an Earthlight, but it's another compelling comparison there.
Right.
You can look into stuff like the Michael Persinger God helmet, and some of the people sense certain smells associated with that as well. So I tried to sort of parse it all out as best I could.
Well, and that's interesting. And you mentioned Persinger. He was an interesting fellow who had That's it's been interesting interesting. That seems to be the word of the night. But in my research, his name is coming up quite a bit as of late, and so it's just funny how people you start making these little connections, and it really narrows down to it's certain people. But what do you know about? Not to get off subject, but I will because I'm kind of naughty that way. But what do you think about what Persinger was doing with the God helmet?
Well, I think something that's severely lacking in a lot of discourse, especially in this community, but worldwide right now, is the fact that you can like some aspects of what someone has done and disagree with other aspects. I don't think that any of the ideas that, the God helmet represents the fact that people mistake keys and doors often, I think. So in other words, just because you can produce sort of anomalous experiences with something like the God helmet doesn't mean that all anomalous experiences are just that sort of brainwave magnetic field producing these visions. Perhaps that is the key to a door that is something genuinely anomalous. It's interesting. A lot of Persinger's research dealt with the frontal lobe stimulation, and he suspected that this could perhaps have produced a lot of mystics, a lot of holy people, to not only have these sort of ecstatic visions, but also might help them release pleasant odors, which is something that you find in a lot of cases with mystics, some positive ET cases, but also in perhaps this frontal lobe stimulation. He actually mentioned that he thought that the metabolism could be affected by frontal lobe stimulation so much that you would exude a fragrant rose-like smell that he thought perhaps certain saints might actually emit. There's an entire subset of saints who were exhumed called the incorruptibles, and these incorruptible saints whose bodies are still in some places on display today or have not decayed or decayed very little, and when they were exhumed actually ended up smelling fragrant. So I think that Persinger's work is invaluable, and I think that he was probably a lot more open to this being anomalous than a lot of people think. But just because it's a lot like sleep paralysis. Just because something causes anomalous visions doesn't mean they're just a biological product. It could mean that that's a gateway to experiencing or to contacting whatever this other intelligence is that I think is behind a lot of these different things, ufological, cryptozoological, and spiritual as well.
And that's fascinating. Do you think that some of Persinger's work, specifically, the God helmet, could that have been, could that technology be used perhaps as some sort of weapon? Could that be weaponized?
Well, the rule of thumb that everybody says is that anything that's public has been around for at least a generation beforehand in the hands of the powers that be, so to speak. I wouldn't doubt it. It's entirely possible.
And that's interesting. We've got to go to break here really quickly. I'm Erica Lukes here with Joshua Cutchin. We will be right back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Here's what happened on the last episode of Three Guys, No Ties.
Just super badass stuntman and real-life fall guy Matt Rigetti was on the show.
We always laugh because you get an actor on set and casting directors and everybody's like, they've done action, they've done stuff before, and then we're like, okay, yeah, everybody says that.
Yeah, whatever.
And then they show up and you're like, all right, so you did some action, you've got a big fight and a stunt to do, it's going to be demanding. What have you done? And they're like, well, on the last show I threw a punch, punched a guy. And then,
Three Guys, No Ties. Wednesday nights, 7 to 9 Pacific on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Toxins are everywhere, from the air we breathe to the food we eat and the water we drink. In a world where 80,000 known toxins and heavy metals threaten our very existence, how are you going to protect yourself and your loved ones? Introducing Pure Body Extra Strength, the world's first colloidal zeolite that helps trap and remove toxins as well as heavy metals from your body that are messing with your memory, clarity, sleep, and focus. Don't just take our word for it, or the testimonials from our thousands of happy customers. Check out the hundreds of articles and case studies on the National Institute of Health website proving zeolite's powerful ability to remove toxins. For a limited time, listeners to KCOR will receive 10% off their first order. To get started, go to trypurebody.com and enter promo code RADIO10. Again, that's trypurebody.com. Toxic junk is all around us, but now you can take back control of your health and protect yourself by detoxing with Pure Body Extra Strength. You'll be on your way to sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and feeling more energetic. Go to trypurebody.com right now and get started today.
In the shadows, a voice cries out. Evidence that you're not alone.
You said my name. What is your name?
Proof that the living and the dead coexist. Or do they? Every Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, join writer, producer, and paranormal investigator Greg Bakken on Ghost Box Radio as he explores, interviews, and investigates evidence alongside some of the best in the paranormal community and beyond.
6 people killed.
Ghost Box Radio, Wednesday nights exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, because the dead don't sleep. Ghost Box Radio.
Are you ready to go?
Turn your radio.
It's showtime!
You're listening to the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Break this mode.
Broadcasting from the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada.
Their base is so large it has to draw most of its power from the nearby nuclear fusion plant.
The future of radio is here and now.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts!
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to UFO Classified. I want to thank everybody for always getting into chat, and I want to thank the people that support my show. As you know, this is a listener-supported show, and I really appreciate all of your love, and I am getting more donations all the time, and it really, for people to understand that there is something that is incredibly important that needs to get out there. It means the world to me to have the opportunity to do that. I know that there is something real interacting with us. I know that there are genuine aspects to this, and the truth should be told, and we need to weave through, kind of get through all the garbage that is being put out there. We need to understand the players in the game and their messaging, and we also need to really dig into just places like Norway, Project Heshdalen, and the work of Dr. Massimo Teodoranti and people like that who are conducting scientific research that is mind-blowing, that is groundbreaking. And so on that note, I want to just say that, like I mentioned at the first of the show, it's a breath of fresh air to meet Joshua for the first time. Joshua is an author and has written some incredible books. The Brimstone Deceit is a book I really am looking forward to reading, because this is something that has come into my field of view right at the moment. And so I'm really happy to have Joshua Cutchin back, and you can go to his website, joshuacutchin.com, and read about him, get his books. I'm super stoked. And we were talking about, when we went off to break, we were talking about so many amazing things, but using smells and could some of these things like the god helmet, could that be used for a weapon of some sort? And there are all sorts of complex things to look at, but I mean, Joshua, just continue where we left off.
Well, I'd like to first echo your sentiment. I think we need to acknowledge that whatever lies behind a lot of these strange things, some of them are mundane, some of them are manipulation, and some of them are genuinely anomalous. And just because one thing might exist doesn't exclude the other ones. I'm firmly convinced that there's something genuinely anomalous going on with a lot of cases out there. But at the same time, you can always weaponize. You can always weaponize anything, and you can always fake a lot of things, and things can be faked to one's advantage. As my good friend at Where Did the Road Go podcast, Soraya Azkath, says, just because you can fake a punch for TV or film doesn't mean all punches are fake. So in other words, you can fake a punch for an effect, but doesn't mean all punches are faked.
Right.
So yeah, so I think that the idea that perhaps some sort of smell ray could be, for lack of a better term, weaponized, it's entirely possible. I haven't seen anything in the literature. Again, I haven't really pursued that aspect for the past 3 years because this book's sort of behind me. But it's entirely possible that something could be used to weaponize smell at a distance. And the reason for that, I mean, people might wonder why you would want to even do that. I think lies in the robust history of the philosophy of smell. We have so many sayings associated with smell. Things don't pass the smell test. Something smells fishy. A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Mm-hmm. All these sort of sayings really reflect the fact that throughout a lot of antiquity and even throughout even the Enlightenment, the nose was regarded as being impervious to manipulation. So in other words, your eyes could deceive you, but your nose would never really deceive you. It was sort of viewed as being a little bit more. It sort of cut through the noise and got to the truth of the matter. So it's entirely possible that if someone wanted to, really sell an illusion, they could use smell to sort of emphasize that. I think in terms of whatever this other intelligence is, because I refrain from saying extraterrestrials or anything else
Mm-hmm.
like that, but whatever this non-human intelligence is, I think they can use smell for similar means in terms of manipulation. There is no other sense as attached to memory as smell. Whereas you might be able to consciously look at something that reminds you of something and sort of train yourself to forget or to not remember something that whatever you're looking at reminds you of. The science is pretty much settled that you have no control over the connections between your olfaction and your memory. So you can smell something and it's going to bring that memory back. You can't separate that particular connection.
Oh, fascinating. And so when you were researching this book, tell us about a couple of cases that really stood out to you.
Well, I find it really interesting that the two cases that you find most commonly in UFO, the two smells rather you find most commonly in UFO cases are some sort of sulfur compound. So sulfur dioxide, which is that burning match smell, or hydrogen sulfide, which is that rotten egg smell. You find those two smells often in conjunction with ozone. And historically, again, we have a strong history of ozone being conflated with sulfur. In fact, it was once said that that people should go to the sea because it would give them this would sort of enliven them, and you send people with tuberculosis to the seaside because of the strong ozone smell. But in reality, the smell is actually another sulfur compound. So you already have this conflation between sulfur and ozone, but some people know exactly what ozone smells like. If anyone's ever been near, a transformer that busts or something, that's the smell that you notice. So there are some cases where ozone appears in conjunction with purple or bluish purple light. And the reason that that's significant is because ozone is actually a photochemical scent. So in other words, the introduction of a certain spectra will actually create ozone. And And so whenever you see a case where someone is seeing a UFO with a bluish or purplish light and they say it's sulfur, it very well might be ozone that they're describing. There was a case from, I think it was 1957, of a lady from Texas who described what she said was like a dirigible that disabled his car. Sorry, it was a gentleman, not a lady. And it was this gunmetal black craft that turned into a ball of fire when it took off. And as it took off, there was a smell of ozone that was left in the area. Similarly, there was another case that was from Peppertown, Indiana. It was a person who noticed a strange electrical hum and the smell of ozone at around 6:30 in the evening on 1999, and they sort of were investigating while they were hunting, and once they reached a small valley, they saw a couple of beings huddled around a deer carcass with this landed flying saucer behind them, and accompanied by the smell of ozone, the hunter approached these beings and fired some shots at them, and they retreated and got in their UFO and took off. What I found really interesting in my research is that if you look at the smells that the three most common smells that you would find with UFOs: sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and ozone. They can all be put into an equation where they are neutralized by one another. So if you have hydrogen sulfide, that rotten egg smell, and you add ozone, that breaks down into water and sulfur dioxide. Similarly, if you add more energy to the equation, you'll get sulfur plus water plus just oxygen. So what I hypothesize, in some sense, whatever's behind these UFO sightings, if people see a UFO and they smell ozone, they're sort of entering the equation at one stage. If they go into it and they smell sulfur dioxide, they're entering into it in another stage. And if they enter into this encounter and they smell hydrogen sulfide, it's a different stage. Now, as to why there might be this reaction happening, there was a great essay by a gentleman named Antonio Rulon, which is freely available online, which sort of formed a lot of the backbone of the structure of this section. I went into he had a very small survey sample and he omitted some smells, but he did a great job of looking at not only what UFOs smell like, but why. And like I said, it wasn't comprehensive, but it was a great starting place for this research. And he posited several different ideas that, well, it's something in the environment that people smell. It's coming from the UFO. It's a byproduct from the UFO, et cetera, et cetera. But it's interesting to note that if we are indeed dealing with extraterrestrials, which, again, something I'm not super sympathetic to, but I have to admit is a possibility, ozone is often used as an antiseptic. A lot of water is treated with ozone to remove bacteria and other harmful pathogens. So it's possible that perhaps ozone's being introduced to the environment to sterilize the area around the craft or something like that. Again, my personal views are a little bit more esoteric, but that's something to hang your hat on.
And so I have to ask you, with regard to the sulfur smell, I mean, a lot of times we would equate that to the demonic.
So this is what I found really super fascinating, is that if you look at, sorry, my voice keeps cracking because I'm
I know you've been sick, and I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah. If you look at the mentions of sulfur from a biblical standpoint, it rarely has anything to do with demonic forces. The most common use of sulfur in biblical texts is God's cleansing breath of sulfur. Sulfur was a fumigant. Sulfur was used to cleanse. It's the reason a lot of acne products still have sulfur compounds in them. Sulfur is an antimicrobial. So when in the Bible God cast Satan into the lake of burning sulfur, it wasn't that it was an attempt to cleanse Satan of his evil. So it's not that Satan smells like sulfur because he's evil. Satan smells like sulfur because God is trying to cleanse him of that. Now, people want to go down that demonic route, and I'm enough of a Greg Bishop aficionado that I can't I can't commit to any one thing. And a lot of my work looks at fairy stuff, and I get upset if people say that the fairies were aliens, and I get upset if people say that the aliens are fairies. Similarly, I get upset if people say that aliens aren't demonic or that they are demonic. I don't know. I think there's a lot of overlap there. I think that, it's a bit cliche, but I think a lot of these things that we're talking about are the blind man and the elephant analogy. The blind man holding the elephant's trunk thinks it's a snake, and the blind man touching the elephant's leg thinks it's a tree, and the blind man touching the elephant's tail thinks it's a rug or whatever. I think that's a lot of what we're dealing with on a larger, sort of mythopoetic scale. But the idea that sulfur automatically equals evil is actually not true. At the same time, a lot of compounds, and I'll go into this a little bit in the book, but a lot of compounds associated with decay and decomposition are sulfur compounds, because again, you have that breakdown of material decomposition without the presence of oxygen. If people talk about, we can get a little bit crass here. People talk about flatulence. People talk about it being methane being stinky. Methane does not stink. Full stop. Methane is odorless. Full stop. The reason that we associate that sort of stinky rotten egg smell with, farts is because there is a small amount of hydrogen sulfide in there. But to put it in perspective, you don't have to have a lot of hydrogen sulfide in anything to be detectable. The threshold for human detection of hydrogen sulfide is 0.47 parts per billion. So to put this in perspective, if I had an ink dropper and I dropped a drop of ink into a tanker truck full of water, that ink droplet would be twice that threshold. So we are extremely sensitive to hydrogen sulfide, which again, looking at this from a standpoint of there actually being an objective other intelligence, if whatever it was doesn't want to be noticed, and if it is in control of the entire experience, which I firmly believe it is, what a poor choice to not be noticed. So I think that there's an ulterior motive there, either to be noticed or, as I sort of go into later in the book, hydrogen sulfide has some properties that I think might actually explain its presence in a lot of these encounters. And I'm being a little bit coy there, but it's my least selling book, so I've got to be a little bit coy.
You know what? And to me, like I was telling you in break, that's the book that I want to read the most. I'm just like, yes, because I think it is such a fascinating aspect, and nobody even takes that into account.
Well, that's been my MO. We need another book on Roswell, like a submarine needs a screen door, or I need another hole in my head.
What? Are you kidding me?
Heresy, right?
You're breaking my heart. Come on, Rendlesham. Roswell. Yada yada yada. Yeah.
This is something that Greg and I have talked about at length. Is that one of the things that the late great Kathleen Turner would talk about was the fact that she really was of the belief that something about this would be cracked open by examining the inconsequential, and that's sort of been what I've been looking at for the past couple of books, is really taking a look at something that's inconsequential, and there's still plenty of ground to be covered. I don't know if there's a book to be written on the abduction of pets, but I'm sure there's enough material there to talk about it, and who knows? You might crack something open. You might find some sort of deeper insight there. Not that any of my books have solved jack, but I think that I'd like to think that they sort of moved the discussion forward at least a little bit. Both the Trojan Feast and Brimstone Deceit. Thieves in the Night was sort of just a spooky, miserable book, but yeah.
I mean, and so as you've done your research and all of these things have happened, and you've become friends with people like Greg and things. I mean, have you had anything strange happen in your life?
Of the ufological variety, not. In fact, I was lamenting to my wife the other night. I was like, man, just something. Give me something. Because, you hear these stories about people who walk outside and they look in the sky and say, let me see a UFO. And, something something happens because there's this, psychic connection there. I've had some things that have happened that I think could be loosely qualified as ghost phenomena. But, with me, I'm not really a big fan of even siloing the stuff into different categories. Again, as good friend Soraya says, you see an orb in a haunted house and it's a ghost. You see an orb in the sky and it's a UFO. And orbs are associated with Bigfoot activity too. That's part of the topic of my upcoming book with one of my friends. So as far as separating them out, I've mostly had ghost stuff happen, which we can or can't talk about. It's not the most exciting thing in the world to me. Maybe just me because I've told it enough. But
well, you know what? I would actually really like to hear it if you don't mind.
Well, okay. So the thumbnail sketch of the first thing probably one of the more profound things. I spent a night at Waverly Hills Sanatorium. I saw some anomalous lights and had a large, heavy metal door slam right in my face, like go from completely shut to completely open, so quickly that it like slams the opposite wall, as if someone was kicking it from the other side. And that's one of those. That was probably one of my earlier experiences, and that's one of those you can't get the toothpaste back in the tube moments. After that happens, you're like, I don't know how to.
I can't believe we spent the night at Waverly Hills. You are a brave man.
Yeah, well, this girl I was dating, and I was. It's funny. It's funny because I went in there all cheeky and snarky. I fancied myself a bit of a Hellboy, and I was gonna go in there and kick your butt, ghosts, and I got real meek real quick. So those are the two most profound things that happened there. I did have an experience where at Stonewall Jackson's home in Lexington, Virginia, which was used as a hospital during the American Civil War, there's actually a small, narrow staircase that you have to go up, which means that a tour group has to stay at the top while one tour group comes up and the other tour group comes down, or vice versa. And this was, I think, a sophomore in high school. I was with my parents there. Sorry, a sophomore in college. And we were coming up, and we came up to the top, and there was another tour group there, standing sort of in a corner to our left. And in the middle of the group, there was a boy. I can still see his face today, taller than a lot of the others, maybe 14, 15, sunken cheeks, wearing a Confederate uniform. I thought he was cosplaying. I thought he was a buff. I thought he was a reenactor or something. And I mentioned it to my mom. She hadn't seen it. So, he was really into it, wasn't he? She's like, what are you talking about? Nobody else on the tour had seen it, and none of the people selling tickets who were, de facto gatekeepers for the attraction had seen anybody come through there in a Confederate outfit. So that might have been a ghost. I might have had a momentary embolism or something. I don't know. But
you know what's interesting, and you're telling me these stories, and I lived in during my late 20s and early 30s, I lived in a home that was 100 years old, and it was haunted, and very, very unusual, really special place. But we would have amazing Halloween parties there, and people would come with their night vision, and it was a wonderful place. And I have so many stories, really unusual stories that took place there. But for one Halloween party, I had a friend who was dressed like Reagan from The Exorcist, and with the contacts. I mean, she just was a freak show. And so her and her husband were out messing around on my cold porch. And, she's doing the big creepy thing, and he's filming her. And when
not messing around. Not messing around, messing around.
No. Like she was acting. They weren't. Okay. I mean, that could have been before they turned the film on, but you never know. Maybe I didn't get all of the footage, which that's probably okay.
Okay, sorry.
But when they played the video back, I kid you not, I've seen it. There was a face behind her, and it was really quite shocking to see that, because I know she was sitting on a chair that was right against my wall.
Yeah, I think this is something that, again, I'm really restraining myself to not complain about the ufological establishment as much as I want to, but a magical tenet, like attracts like. That's a thing. If you look at sort of this magical practice, that's totally a thing, and I wouldn't doubt it if the fact that they were sort of in that headspace, and she was dressed up as Linda Blair.
Yep. It was. I'll have to see if I can try to find that footage somewhere and stuff. And it was incredible. And I went to the Whaley House once. Well, I've been there twice actually. And the first time I went there, oh my gosh, 15 years ago, I rented it out. And so we got locked in there. The lady turned off the lights, have at it, and photographed some very unique things and had some pretty trippy experiences. But it was, it's just, there's so many interesting places, like Waverly Hills, like the Whaley House, all of these places that have a history, and whether it's Grandma Edna's ghost or whether it's, who knows what it is. But I love the fact that you don't try to put it in a box.
I made a graphic for one of my articles on the website a while back that was a Venn diagram of skeptics and people who'd spent the night in the haunted house, and it's just two circles completely separate from each other. If you want to have that, as somebody I look up to, Gordon White says, if you want to have that moment where you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, just spend a couple of nights in an abandoned asylum with a Ouija board. Just do it. And if you don't have something happen to me, if you don't have something moderately weird happen to you, just, I don't know what to tell you. It's not rocket science. This stuff's out there.
It absolutely is, and it's been interesting for me on my radio show. I've interviewed some very hardcore skeptics and people who are very critical of people in the UFO field. Shocking that would actually happen, but they've when you dig, they've had experiences. They've had experiences they cannot explain. And I think maybe their skepticism starts coming from dealing with the idiots in the field.
Well, yeah, that's the problem. Not only is dogma just anathema to me in general, but the problem is when you lead off with a skeptic talking about alien technology, you've already set up like 5 thresholds for them to cross. Extraterrestrials, technology. Can we just talk about the weird thing that is seen here? Let's just say it's odd. Let's just start from that point of strength and then move on from there. But yeah, I think that a lot of us have at least one strange thing happen to us per day, and we don't realize it. There's so many things that happen in your day-to-day life. I would say at least 4 or 5 times a day, I have something that's just one of those things, whether it's misplacing my keys or whatnot. Obviously, that's not always something strange, but I wouldn't doubt it if once or twice, it was really weird. You thought it was just a shadow, but it was actually, interdimensional demonic dwarf or something. I'm just saying that, we're conditioned to write these things off because that's the logical thing. And, 95 times out of 100, it's probably exactly what it is. But I'm convinced that we experience more stranger things than we realize. It reminds me of something that I think it was said on Greg's show, Radio Misterioso, that everyone's backyard is a mini Skinwalker ranch. So.
I love that. It's a great way to end before our big break. I'm Erica Lukes here with Joshua Cutchin. Stick around. I know we're going to have a lively conversation for the second half. And since Libertas is listening, the best is yet to come. That was for you. We'll catch you on the other side of the break.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the second half of UFO Classified. I'm Erica Lukes. Always happy to be here. It is amazing to me I get messages from all over the world, and with some of the exposure that has happened as of late, it seems to be increasing. I'm grateful to have that opportunity, and with that comes the challenge of the little trolls and all sorts of fun that can be had by people that clearly don't have a life, or I don't know what, maybe need to get a big truck. Maybe they should do that. Maybe kind of lay off things, get a big truck. It might be a good time for them. But anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about that and some of the trolling and negative behavior a little bit later in the show. I'm here with Joshua Cutchin, who's just a delight to talk to. And we were talking about, before we went to break, we were talking about the fact that strange things happen every day. And if you are paying attention, I believe that's absolutely correct. I know strange things certainly happen to me, and it's interesting. Some people get it, some people don't, some people flow with it. I don't know what, but to me, it's so fascinating, and there's so many aspects of life that are just awe-inspiring, and I've lost that as of late because of all the darkness surrounding Skinwalker Ranch and the people involved, and the possibility that while Bigelow was there, they were actually testing non-lethal weapons. All of these things, it's become a very heavy subject for me, so I'm so happy to talk about a lighter part of the subject.
Well, we'll see about the lightest part, but I think that it's up to each of us to try and re-enchant our own world. I with my last book, Thieves in the Night, I talked about, maybe there isn't something behind the fairy lore, but, it re-enchants the forest with a sense of wonder, and maybe there's nothing to UFOs, but it re-enchants the sky with a sense of wonder that we should always have. I mean, like, to look at the night sky, it's amazing, and we get sort of desensitized to it over time. And I think re-enchantment is a big part of what each of us should be trying to do in our daily lives. And that sounds a little bit silly, but I think it's, I think it enriches life in a lot of ways,
Well, I think that's really, that to me is needed, and I appreciate hearing that, because like I was saying, it's like, sometimes this work takes a really dark turn, and it's like, I want to go back to, my first sighting, or, an encounter I had that I couldn't explain. And there was just such a sense of awe. And it was, so I want to go back to that, and I want to remember why I fell in love with this so passionately to begin with, because I understand that there is something interacting with us. I know that. But what it is the $1 million question. And for me to have you, not necessarily, you're not jumping on the ET bandwagon. It's not the brothers from Zeta Reticuli and the Venusians, those right, tall, sexy blondes that clearly were, in every TV show known to man, but they were, it's just like, oh my God, we go down these holes. And I want to ask you, when you look back historically at the UFO subject, do you see, or do you think there could have been any possibility that the powers that be, or political factions or religious factions, could have tried to manipulate the topic?
Well, according to UFO Twitter now, we should all trust the government implicitly, but sorry, not sorry. I think it's so. I'm sort of probably amongst a lot of my friends. I probably believe, for example, the 9/11 narrative more than a lot of people do. A lot of people, like conspiracists do, and like, I'm not dismissing it, and I'm not saying that they're right or that I'm wrong. I'm not, but I think that there is sort of a motto that we should always keep in the back of our mind, that any sort of power structure will never let a good tragedy go to waste, and never let a good opportunity to manipulate and to control go to waste. And I completely think it's the case. mean, I think that I was talking with Brett Rains about this earlier today, the author of the new John Keel biography. I think that a lot of the people who are in the current trenches, the disclosure crowd, as it were, I admire their enthusiasm, but I find their sort of naivete a little bit disconcerting, and I find that they tend to shut themselves off to looking at this through not only a historical lens, which has proven time and again that these topics are manipulated. I mean, you look at, I know it's sort of tired at this point, but Benowitz, and that's what we know about.
Right.
Stuff like that. But also a lack of awareness about where we are geopolitically, the fact that we are in a de facto Cold War II. We have people scouring over the freaking Tic Tac footage, and they don't realize that we're in what is practically a full-fledged Cold War with China and with other powers. And the timing of announcing a space force with all this sort of newfound interest and admittance that there are other actors at play. It all just seems fishy. And of course, in the Church of Disclosure, if you even say anything like that, like maybe this could be good news, and that's what I always say. This could be good news, but maybe it's not. And then of course I'm a troll and a hater at that point. And I feel like that there's not a lot of perspective from that standpoint, and it's not me hating on anything. I mean, I think that if everything is as it appears at the surface level, I think, Erica, you and I both would be freaking ecstatic.
Absolutely.
It's not that. It's just we've all been burned, and some of us remember those past love affairs, and some of us don't. And I think that some of us are just proceeding with caution, and we're not necessarily being naysayers. We're just saying, let's look at this from every angle because we've been hurt in the past.
Right. And I mean, granted, when I first got into this subject, I mean, I thought we were doing this for the greater good, and we were all in it together, and we're all volunteering our time, and yay, everybody's, I learned so many harsh lessons very, very quickly, and people that I supported and trusted turned out to be, the absolute scum of the earth, and I couldn't. It's been a very rude awakening, so to speak, and I have been digging deep like you have, and it's like I have a library that most people don't have, an archive that probably one of the best in the Western United States, and I've been able to go back and look at the history. It's right there, and there's a problem here. And we have to realize, in my opinion, and great. I was really happy to see that New York Times article. Yay! It for a second, it's it gave we could take things. People that wouldn't think about it thought about it, and that was great. But again, you hear the wording from Elizondo, and you hear the way you look at the way things are going, and the threat. I don't personally think it's a threat. Prove it to me. And so I'm not. It's a control system. You hit it on the head. And I think that people that are out there kind of drinking the Kool-Aid and that are willing to take a sword for some of these people, first of all, I have to wonder if they're on the payroll. What are they getting out of this? Are they not capable of looking at facts, or are some of the people in these groups befriending them and making them feel special?
So I don't disagree with you. That's a really easy argument to go to, though. You're a shill. My primary frustration is that, and look, I'm a relative neophyte. My first book was released in 2015. I mean, I can't believe that I've come as far as I have since then. But at the same time, I just freaking mainlined this stuff into my artery, and I tried to learn as much as I could, and it's almost as if a lot of the people who are really sort of towing that line are just completely unaware of the Bill Moore speech. I mean, I just don't understand how they can think that this might not be the same thing. It might be different. But it might not be the same. it's frustrating for me because it has become a pseudo culty, I think, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say that because any amount of dissent is completely written off as being it's dismissed as being hate speech, basically. I did a really interesting. This is partially unfair. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Partially unfair, but I took an article by a renowned or relatively prominent TTSA supporter and replaced Tom DeLonge with Marshall Applewhite and TTSA with Heaven's Gate and Disclosure with like the Ascension. And it's all these promises of things to come in the future and what they've done, all the great stuff that they're done. Like it's sort of like a Mad Lib approach, but it kind of reads the same way. And I'm not saying that they're not bringing anything to the table. I think that the New York Times discussion, honestly, like more people are into UFOs and are open to talking about it than ever. TTSA has done that. I'm not saying they haven't. They've done a great job. I find the cult of personality and the cult of willing to toe the party line is nothing but unvarnished tribalism at this point. And I try to express, even if I try to couch things as delicately as I can, I just get met with like, well, you're wrong. This is dumb. We'll show you. There was the same person whose article I sort of copied and replaced with those terms. Made mention that they were keeping a blacklist after disclosure to shame everyone, and it's like,
are you kidding?
How can you? Yeah. I can show you the tweets.
Oh, please.
How is this not some sort of weird, culty, pseudo-religious thing?
Wow.
I'm asking questions. I'm helpfully skeptical. I'm not debunking. I'm trying not to be negative. I'm just saying, like, can you at least look at it from a different perspective? But yeah, keeping a blacklist, which is fascistic and quite frankly disturbing.
It is disturbing.
Keeping a blacklist after disclosure to name and shame. Taking screenshots of people who dared question TTSA, dared question Elizondo, dared question DeLonge. Just like what planet are we on? And that's not, and again, it's not even so much if you think they're doing great work, great. Be helpfully skeptical, be helpfully optimistic, but don't persecute and like shame people. And of course, that's partially the social media thing. But I think that ufology leans into the lesser. Ufology leans into humanity's lesser virtues.
Right, it really does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad, and I think that a lot of behavior that is seen in the UFO community. I mean, this is if you were a professional, in your workplace, you could not behave that way. And a lot of this stuff is cyber stalking, cyberbullying. I mean, there are so many.
I've heard stories, and again, I don't know if they're verified or not, but I've heard stories of death threats. And I don't know if that's. I haven't had any, but I've heard. I've heard stories of death threats about people who dared question these things. And it's like, really? And at the end of the day, is this even worth? That sort of vitriol.
It's interesting because I, especially being a woman. I mean, I've gone through some things, and it's just like, I don't know. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And I was, really naive and hopeful to begin with. And I trusted, I wanted to believe the best in people. And unfortunately, I've learned time and time again that isn't the case, and that this attracts people that are a lot of times maybe mentally unwell. And that's sad because there are people out there who have genuinely experienced things and they need support, and the subject should be taken seriously. And so it's just unfortunate to have some of these things happen. But
the other thing that that sort of old adage of a few rotten apples spoiling the bunch, because I think that a lot of the people involved in this field are genuinely well intentioned and genuinely curious and genuinely open to things. But the other trend that I've noticed I find really profoundly disturbing is, people will talk about extraterrestrial craft, or as they often say, crafts, which, as someone with a journalism major, drives me up a wall, crafts. But they'll talk about, extraterrestrial craft as if it's, a settled debate. And I'll say, well, have you ever considered the fact this might be psi effects? And they'll say, no. And I said, well, have you ever read the work of Eric Wallet? It has a great book on the possibility that UFOs are, sort of group sourced poltergeist phenomena, basically. Well, no, but I think it's dumb. I don't think that UFOs could be anything other than extraterrestrial craft. Have you ever read John Keel? No, because the idea of it being, interdimensional monsters is dumb. The idea of it being some sort of it's this idea of like my mind is made up, and if I'm going to discount alternative lines of thought without having even read them. People are making proclamations about technology, about this or that or the other, and they haven't even done the basic research. I mean, Keel's work is 50 years old at this point. Right. 5 decades, half a century old. Take the time, do the work, do the research. It doesn't take forever. Like I said, I've been in this for probably, honestly, in terms of interest in getting into this again, 6 or 7 years, right? Take the time, read the research. If you read that stuff and you think it's a bunch of malarkey, that's fine. But don't say that you don't like it, but you don't think it's real because there must be aliens. No, take the time, take in a bunch of different hypotheses, because there are tons of hypotheses. And the amount of people who haven't read Jung, Jung's Flying Saucer book, and who are commenting on UFOs, it hurts me. The number of people who are talking about UFOs and haven't listened to Terence McKenna's lectures on UFOs, it kills me, because there's such a glorious, insightful, delicate, nuanced description to that's gotten lost in a lot of this, again, technological fetishism. What sort of propulsion do they use? How could this craft move this fast? And all the assumptions that are sort of embedded therein. It just kills me. And I'm not asking for them to think what I think. I'm just asking for them to do the due diligence of looking into these things that they disagree with. And again, that's sort of, America's problem writ large, but
well, it's just funny. It's like, how can you disagree with something that you don't even know about? I mean, it's just, wow.
Right.
And, it's like if you don't know the history, if you don't understand other people's research, how can we move forward? And that's, to me, a really concerning thing. I think right now, where we see certain groups, and this is one of my big things, that are working behind the scenes to sweep up data and to get it in certain places where we will not have access, MUFON, various other organizations overseas and whatnot. But, and now we've got a real push on social media and on TV shows and things to basically rewrite the history. But for right now, my God, it's go to Greenwood Archives, go to Project 1947. Look at some of the people who have contributed a lot, and look at the history. My God, before it's gone.
Well, and that's so 2 things, and then I want to move on, because I could just whinge about this all night, and I don't want. I try to be positive, but 2 things. Number 1, you are sitting at a point in history where, short of the Library of Alexandria, you have more at your fingertips than ever. You have no excuse to not find things. And B, if you are intellectually honest, you will seek out things that you disagree with, that you don't like, and you will read them, and you will engage with them, and you will either change your opinion or you will find reasons to support your opinion. But you've got to engage with things you don't agree with. You have to do that if you're going to be intellectually honest in any discipline. And, science has this problem. Politics certainly has this problem. And ufology has this problem as well. So find things that you think are crazy and stupid, and figure out why you think they're crazy and stupid. And the answer can't be like, well, I think this it's dumb. There aren't monsters under my bed. Well, have you ever try doing a sigil working and before you tell me that magic isn't real. Try doing a ritual before you say that magic isn't real.
For people that don't know what that is, will you just tell them briefly?
Oh Lord. Well, so sigil work, I think, could possibly be best distilled into illustrated prayer work. Again, I walk this line of being a Christian and being a complete like weirdo pagan, so I don't know what I am at this point. But basically, it's you set out an intention and you create. And there are some people who have some very good methodology to do this. You create an image that represents that intent. You discharge it, which there are some skeevy ways to discharge your sigil and some non-skeevy ways to discharge it. But after you create this design that signifies your intent, you discharge it, you send it to the universe, and you forget about it. And it will either work or it won't. And if anyone's interested in looking into the best way to do sigils, the way that I've done it in the past, my first time was garbage. The second time, every single one fired off. Go to Gordon White's Rune Soup website and look up anything that he has to say about sigils. He has a great methodology that, for me, it seems very not only logical, but is a good way to construct them and a way to activate the sigils and to sort of see if they manifest in your life. So and again, the idea isn't that the actual piece of paper has any sort of power. It's the idea that your intention and the act of thinking about it, concentrating on it, then destroying it, forgetting about it, sort of activates that in your reality. And like I said, the last set that I set off, every single one really did well. And I'm sure we're going to get some hate mail about being devil worshippers, and that's not the way that I feel. But anyway, it's if you're interested in sort of magical practice at all, and you're like, is this real or not? Just do some sigil work, fire off 5 of those babies, and see what happens. And it's from everyone that I've ever talked to, it's pretty consistent. Like I said, my first time, not so great. I redefined it, had extra little. I sort of tweaked my method a little bit, and it really came to pass. So that was about 2 years ago. So I'm overdue for doing that whole process again soon.
Ooh, and I want to talk to you more about that when we get back from break. Thank you for giving people knowledge about that, because I don't think most people really understand or have knowledge of what that is. And Gordon White has fascinated me for a long time. I must say, I would love to have the opportunity to talk to him.
He's easily one of the top 3 smartest people I've ever talked to. He's intimidating in that respect, but also he's a very kind and generous individual as well. So Gordon's a good guy.
That's awesome. I'm really happy to know that. And thank you I'll try to reach out to him. I am Erica Lukes here getting ready for our last break. Thank you for supporting UFO Classified. My guest this evening, Joshua Cutchin. You can find his work at joshuacutchin.com. You can get A Trojan Feast, The Brimstone Deceit, all of his wonderful books, read his essays and blog. We will be right back, and we'll catch you on the other side of the break.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Radio signal.
Looking for cutting-edge conversations while exploring quantum possibilities? Then look no further.
We've got to fix Broadcast Team Alpha.
Hosted by Nori Love and Augie Nost. They're connecting the dots and unraveling the cosmic mysteries. With interviews from top experts, embedded insiders, and whistleblowers from around the world on an array of topics. From health, wellness, consciousness, and ufology. All in pursuit of
the truth.
Broadcast Team Alpha, hosted by Nori Love and Augie Nost. Live Tuesday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The balance of power is shifting in the world today, and the old paradigm is being replaced with a new one. One filled with love, positivity, and prosperity for all. The only question you have to ask yourself, are you ready for a change?
Broadcast Team Alpha.
Come explore the quantum possibilities.
Vegas, baby! Vegas' #1 source for talk and new music.
How cool is that?
There is a world outside that which we live in, a realm where fact and fiction collide. The Paradigm Matrix. The Paradigm Matrix. Hosted by Willie Miranda. Every Friday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us, even now in this very room.
The 1 hour show that will surely leave you hanging on the edge of the rabbit hole. The Paradigm Matrix explores a universe of topics from UFOs, cryptozoology, conspiracies, as well as all things paranormal.
Enter a world of the twisted and deformed.
Friday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. The Paradigm Matrix. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, where fact and fiction collide.
Alien Deceptions, a suspenseful sci-fi romance thriller by Tina Marie, featuring the tantalizing Erica Jones and the mysterious Russell Hamilton. An out-of-this-world book of fiction based on years of document facts and files the government does not want you to know about, at least not yet. Alien Deceptions by Tina Marie. Available now at Amazon.com or get a signed copy at TinaMarieEntertainment.com. Get your copy now.
1, 2, 3, 4!
To the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
I love the way it sounds. Love the music. I listen all day.
The future of radio is here and now.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Very happy to be back here. I want to thank Tina Marie for being a great producer and show she runs KCOR, which I feel is a very great network. I'm proud to be here with so many other wonderful hosts, and I want to thank the people that support the show. You mean the world to me, Northern UFOs. You know how I feel about you. You are awesome, and I appreciate you getting my show out on YouTube. For all of you who are listening, if you could take a moment and maybe share some of my shows in different chat rooms, that would be wonderful. I want to get the word out. I'm working tirelessly to make sure I'm doing good research and to try to expose the truth and to try to highlight people that have made great contributions in this field and need to be remembered. Barry Greenwood was on last week. He's been on my show many times. You need to look at his work and really understand that he is probably, in my opinion, the world's foremost archivist and historian in the topic. Jan Aldrich, Project 1947. I mention these people a lot. Gordon Lohr, my dear friend and co-author of my new book that will be coming out at the beginning of the year. I look forward to that. But so many wonderful people, so many people that actually deserve UFO Researcher of the Year awards and that don't get attention from anybody. So I'm proud to do that. I think the world of all of them. And so I'm here tonight with someone who I'm really super stoked I finally get to talk to, and I can tell we're going to be friends. This is going to be a beautiful relationship. I love it. I'm here with Joshua Cutchin, who has written A Trojan Feast, The Brimstone Deceit, which I'm looking forward to. That's going to be the next thing on my nightstand. He had a chapter in UFOs, Reframing the Debate, Wood Knocks, Thieves in the Night, all of these things. He has some amazing ideas, and he's right on the same type of path that I am. Absolutely. We don't necessarily think this is ET, and we don't know what it is, and we're not going to lump it into one, try to classify it and say, you know, this is a ghost, this is blah, 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 because at the end of the day, nobody knows. And nobody and I've just to ask you, has anybody actually given us proof that this is ET?
I would argue I would argue not. I mean, the sort of fallback answer that people say is that there's life on this planet, so there must be life elsewhere. Yes, that's true, but the scenario that I think is always really tickles my fancy is that we're finally contacted by aliens that land on the White House lawn, and they come down and they greet President whoever, and we say, "Oh, we've been watching you for thousands of years, seeing you in the sky, and we're so glad you're here." And they're like, "Oh, no shit, you see that too?" You see those things too, I think that no. If you look at even stuff as far back as certain amounts of fairy lore, there are stories of the good folk being star worshippers. I think that the materialist paradigm has us so repressed in terms of our association with the non-physical that we automatically assume that the gods must have been aliens when we never question the idea that maybe the aliens were gods. The idea that when they came from the stars, we assume that means that they came down in, rickety nuts and bolts craft and landed because they came from the stars, when we haven't, entertained the idea. Again, as somebody like we talked about earlier, Gordon White is positive that they are the stars, that they are sort of beings from the stars. I mean, again, this was sort of the primary topic of my essay in Reframing the Debate, which was that, if telepathy is a thing in ufology, which there are very few ufological cases of any real substance that you can point to that don't involve some sort of telepathic content. If telepathy is a thing, then materialism is falsified. Don't at me. I have plenty of scientific philosophers who have said the exact same thing. It's not just me. Then if materialism is falsified, it's completely off the table what these things can be. They can be time travelers. They could be earth elementals. They could be, one idea that I'm kind of keen on is, alien ghosts or ghosts remote viewing the earth. If telepathy is a thing, then remote viewing might be a thing. And why send people, eons and eons of, ages away to Earth when you could just remote view them from the comfort of your easy chair across the galaxy? Maybe whatever we see is a manifestation of aliens remote viewing Earth. There's just a lot of possibilities, and I that's what I tend to bristle towards in the ufological community, is the idea that this is settled, that these are extraterrestrials in a flesh and blood, nuts and bolts sense. Mm-hmm. Because even if you are conservative, UFOs and UFO contact experiences are weird with a capital W, and they do not fit into what we know or what we want to, or they don't fit into what we know in terms of modern science and a physicalist paradigm. But ufology is so eager to sit at the big kids table of science that they have completely, I mean, they're so eager to sit with a cool crowd that they don't realize that, no, if you just sit around, the cool crowd will come to you. You've got to sit with the fact that this is weird, and this is weird in a non-physical, non-materialist sense. That's sort of my 2 cents on that particular subject.
And I absolutely think that's really, you're right on about that. And I think it is interesting that we try to, like I said, just put things into baskets. I mean, I guess that's the way we try to process things. And okay, this is E.T. or this is Grandma Moses or this is, it's just and I probably thought that. I fell into some of those belief systems. And the more I've learned, it's like I just,
And everyone may well be right. Ghosts might be dead people, and Bigfoot might be a giant hairy ape, and UFOs might be aliens. It might be that simple. But I think that if with things that are this ephemeral and this unsettled, you have to admit a certain amount of ignorance, and that you don't see it a lot nowadays.
No, right, exactly. And I have to ask you, speaking of John Keel, he mentioned window areas. And what is your take on that, specific places that seem to have all of these types of events take place?
I think there's something to it. I mentioned earlier that I think that everybody's backyard is sort of a mini Skinwalker Ranch, mm-hmm. which I think in terms of your day-to-day experience is something genuinely anomalous happening that you shrug off. I think the odds of that are high. At the same time, I don't think that you're going to run into the same amount of phenomena in, the woods of the Bridgewater Triangle that you're going to run into at Trump Tower. It's just you're
not kidding about that one.
And I think that if you look at so an idea that I've kicked around for a while is that I think that in creating this interconnected web of signals and electricity and Wi-Fi, we tend to think of the fact that quote unquote primitive people have more experiences with the spiritual because they are in fact primitive and uneducated and not advanced. But sometimes I wonder if the fact that we haven't created sort of a paranormal Faraday cage around ourselves with all this electricity and Wi-Fi and all these modernist trappings. The reason that you don't experience the paranormal as often in the city is because there's all this interference. And the reason that you experience it in the wilderness, not only looking at stuff like the fact that the wilderness is where spiritual revelations tend to happen anyway, historically and culturally, but those are places that have the least amount of this sort of reverse paranormal Faraday cage around them, insulating them from the paranormal. And I think that if you look at a lot of these window areas, they tend to be more rural. But I think that they sort of get piled on with a bunch of different stuff. Something that I've found really fascinating, that I think, again, talking about small things that might be significant that people could write a book on, the number of battlefields, especially in thinking specifically of Revolutionary and Civil War battlefields here in the States, the number of battlefields that have had pre-existing spookiness attached to them before the battle ever took place. This is this place where the indigenous people would never go, or said that there was a legend of something. And then it just so happens that, this is where these two giant factions decide to shed blood. It's almost like the battle itself was sort of a ritual offering to whatever was happening there. I think specifically of Chickamauga battlefield up here in North Georgia, which supposedly has this legend of Old Green Eyes, which is sort of I'd hesitate to call it sort of a Bigfoot creature, but it's more of a wraith sort of creature. It's like this hairy green-eyed thing that feasts on corpses, and that existed, pre-existed the actual battle of Chickamauga for who knows how long, centuries, thousands of years, whatever. So I think that certain areas are born bad in some sense. I think that might have something to do with ley lines, but I think that also we can create areas that are sort of bad earth, for lack of a better term.
And it's interesting because I have a specific researcher that I respect and hold in high regard. He is just like, yes, there are places like this. You just don't go there.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to listen to. I think that in Western society, the indigenous voice has become lost a lot in a lot of the stuff. And if you look at a lot of these indigenous tales of where these areas are, they're pretty clear and they map on pretty well. Now, whether or not that's some sort of archetypal idea of, the cave is bad, don't go into the cave, and nowadays we're like, you get lost in a cave, caves collapse, etc. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I think that some places are just nasty places to go. Again, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not sure which, my little slice of Georgia is neither one of those. But, it's been a while since I've had that real powerful experience with something anomalous, and I'm sort of craving that again. So hopefully at some point.
I know what you're going to be doing tonight.
Yeah, right. Well, we'll see.
Yeah, it is. It's a fascinating thing. When I went over to Norway, and it was such a wonderful experience to be there and to talk to the people who'd had experiences and the people that were actually researching the phenomena, the Hessdalen phenomena, and just to hear their take. And it's like these are people that understood that there was more. But they didn't know what, and they weren't going to label it, and it just was stepping back and observing. and letting it be. And it's just such a cool thing. And you're right, we get so trapped in our surroundings and we don't take time to go out and connect. And I think that's unfortunate because indigenous peoples, they did. And they understood that there were specific places that held a lot of power, whether good or bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the connection is what we're really losing. And I think that as wonderful as this interconnected global communication system we have is, I think that we're losing a lot of that. Again, we are disenchanting. We're actively disenchanting the world every time we're staying in and watching Netflix. Which, believe me, I do it as much as anybody else. But
unfortunately, I started a new show on Netflix, and it's like, really? But I'm digging it, so whatever.
At the same time, I don't want to act like every copse of woods is haunted or spooky. It's not. It's just flat out not. But I do think that there are some areas that are spookier. My friend and co-author of my next book, Tim Renner, lives in eastern Pennsylvania, and that is a spooky place. That is everywhere you go, there's a particular site where he's had some Bigfoot activity happen that I had something kind of quasi-interesting, nothing definitive happen to me. There is like 20 minutes from his house. I'm like, I wish that I had that here. I wish I had something like that. But the thing is, again, Tim and I have talked about this. His name is Tim Renner. Tim and I have talked about this. I think that everybody probably has that space 20 minutes from their house.
Absolutely.
Short of, again, living in the middle of, Queens or something. But I think that anybody who's in any sort of 20 minutes outside of civilization, let's say, or 20 minutes outside of the borders of your small town, I'm sure that everybody has that. It's just a matter of finding that. That's the real challenge. So, I don't know how to empower people to find that space. If I could find it, I would, and I'd be there, 3 nights a week. I think that things are stranger than we give them credit for, and I think that. I'm sounding like such a hypocrite because I don't do this, but unplug more often, and get out there. I think that's the real secret.
Well, I think too, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you have brought up some great points, and I think that I just have to say that right now with technology, with this new push that we're seeing from certain factions to portray whatever this is as a threat, that is, again, I'm going back to that control system. That's a control system to disempower us. Because when I connect or when other people have these experiences, I mean, whether they're frightening or, good, I mean, there is a connection there that nobody else can touch. And one thing that has been really fascinating to me about Skinwalker Ranch is I've been up there. I study that area. I talk to a lot of people that live around there. I've had some interesting experiences, and for me, it was just a sense of like, wow, this is incredible. Mm-hmm. But when you come back and you start getting caught up in all the crap and the narrative that's been put out there and all these different things, it's like those types of things get in there and they taint your experience. And I think that's what unfortunately, I think that's what's taking place. It's like this is a need to grab power away from people, because if they were to truly tap into it, that people would, that could cause a problem for the powers that be.
Well, I think something that gets lost in a lot of the shuffle is the personal aspect of the experience. I mean, with exceptions like Fatima and maybe the Battle of Los Angeles, these are always almost intensely personal experiences, which is why, coupled alongside the thoughts of people that I admire like Jeff Ritzmann, who contends that the obfuscation and intentional suppression of the subject is sort of built into the actual phenomena. I think that stuff like disclosure is probably never going to happen in the sense that a lot of people want it to happen. I may be completely wrong. Please, little green men, come in, land on the White House lawn. But I here's the thing: the people who talk about this being personal, the people who talk about this being completely in control and deliberately being impish, deliberately being tricksterous, deliberately concealing the truth, deliberately being self-negating, which is an important aspect of all these phenomena. You know, a lot of people I think a lot of contactees had something happen to them and then they started faking stuff, and so it's self-negating. A lot of poltergeist cases had something happen to them, it's self-negating. I think all these things speak to the fact that the people who say that these things are built in, the trickster phenomena, the self-negating, the personal aspect, I think I haven't seen them proven wrong yet. And I suspect that even if we get some sort of, even when we get some sort of admission that the government has known about UFOs, I think that's built into this phenomena. This sort of, it's meant for you. It's not meant for everybody. It's meant for you, and it's meant for him, and it's meant for her, and it's meant for the person to your left and the person to your right. But it's not meant for all of you. It's not a one-size-fits-all sort of phenomena. That's my own 2 cents. Again, we'd love to be proven wrong on that. I don't see that something like the trickster archetype and the personal aspect, I think, is so baked into whatever's going on behind these phenomena, not just UFOs, but Bigfoot, Sasquatch, ghosts, etc. I think it's so built in that it's always going to be elusive, and it's always going to be hard to pin down, and I don't think it's going to ever be provable. Again, please prove me wrong. I think we all want that if we're being intellectually honest. But we'll see.
Well, absolutely, and I think I absolutely agree. I don't think, to me, disclosure, I don't need disclosure from my government because they haven't given the truth to me about this for 70 years. And they're not going to start now. I mean, let's just get that out there, plain and simple. That's my opinion, and I'm sure I'll be proven right.
Yeah. Well, from the organization that brought you the Tuskegee experiments and internment camps and everything else that was great about the 20th century, let's find out the truth about UFOs. Until there is, even I've heard this talked about before. Even if there were to be a little, alien gray to waddle up beside Donald Trump at the disclosure announcement, people would still say it was fake news nowadays, and it's not going to be accepted by everyone until it's accepted by them personally, and it's not going to be accepted by them personally until it touches them personally. And I think that's sort of where we sit with all this. It's just going to hang out there in the ether. What a downer of it. We didn't even talk about fairies, Erica.
I'm so sorry that you need to. Fairies. Okay, dang it. You need to come back then.
Yeah, tell me when. I'll be here.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Because we've talked about, in my opinion, some very important things and thought-provoking things that people need to be aware of and contemplating. It's I love it.
You let me do my cranky old man rant, so that's that's good.
I like it. That was good. I've had a lot of fun tonight. And so when is your new book going to be out?
That's a great question.
Well,
it's the first time I've done a co-author partnership. So Timothy Renner, who has a fantastic podcast, I equate, especially its early episodes, but even so, it's continued this theme. It's almost like Serial for the paranormal. He does a lot of on-site recordings, which are really cool.
Sweet.
Timothy Renner, his podcast is Strange Familiars. He's an absolute fantastic guy. He has a lovely family that I got to spend some time with, and his son is one of the smartest people I've ever talked to. He's like 13 years old, and I'm like, oh gosh, I've got to be on my toes. So he and I have written a 2-volume work. I say 2 volumes. We were originally going to have it be 1 book, but I looked at him like, Tim, each of these is as long as my books, which are like 70 to 80,000 words a piece. So we've got to split this into 2. The new book is called Where the Footprints End. Volume 1 should be dropping, if not in December, in early January. I've just received word from him that all his edits are back. So we just got to get those final edits in place, which should be a day or 2. And then I've got to make an index and notes, which I'll probably be drinking heavily during, but that's fine. That's what making endnotes and edits is, indexes rather, is all about. So volume 1 is going to be focused just on the intersection of Bigfoot and folklore, specifically, UFOs, fairies, witches, women in white, a lot of just this folklore that people are sort of overlooking the overlaps between Bigfoot and these other aspects of folklore. Volume 2 will happen at some point, but that'll be happening later. It's just sort of like Weird Bigfoot. So I've been pitching it, and Greg has chastised me for this many times, but I'll pitch it again. It's sort of like Passport to Magonia for Bigfoot. Not that I think I'm valet. I'm just trying to get people in that headspace, Okay. Not that I think I'm valet, but like that headspace of like, this is the phenomena and the folklore surrounding it.
That's cool.
So that should be dropping real soon.
Awesome. And so where can people find you? We've got 1 minute to wrap it up.
Yeah, so joshuacutchin.com. I'll have all my interviews listed up there. Also, all 3 of my books, A Trojan Feast, The Brimstone Deceit, Thieves in the Night, with also links to UFOs, Reframing the Debate, and Woodknocks Volume 3 are all linked there, as well as I keep a ill-maintained blog. I'm trying to do a little bit better about that.
Oh, it's hard, I know.
Yeah. So that's all right there, and just check it out whenever you get a chance.
Sweet. Thank you. I'm going to have you back, and thanks to all my people that tune in and listen. I love you guys. Have a wonderful weekend. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Be safe, my friends, and I will catch you next week. Stick around for Willie Miranda. He will be up next, and I will be here next Friday. See you then.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting